Imagine the following scene: a silent battle, where the warfare is home itself, weapons are sharp words, and the prize in dispute is something that many underestimate until losing respect. This is the real story of how a strong woman, but blinded by pride, almost destroyed everything that was the most valuable, and how a nicely fragile daughter-in-law turned the game with a strategy that few expected. For almost 3 decades, homeowners like Katerina Mikhailovna Goranova reigned absolute in their domains. At 58, with a husband reduced in the shadow of himself and a son who, until then, obeyed each order as a soldier, she purely believed that her word was law. But fate loves ironies. It was precisely the love of Kirill, his only son, who shook the foundations of this small domestic empire. When he introduced Svetlana, a 30-year-old administrator in a private clinic with a salary of 80,000 riaris, Katerina felt the floor shake. It wasn't just the money, it was the posture. Svetlana did not lower her head, did not accept being treated as a maid and, worse of all, had her own opinions. For a woman accustomed to rule with iron hand, this was a statement of war. The first months were a psychological chess game. Katerina, master in handling, expected the right moment to unravel the final blow. Svetlana, in turn, pretended not to realize the indirect poisonous, betting that time would bring balance. Kirill, arrested in the middle of the crossfire, tried to please both, but their income of 50,000 riaris as a mechanic did not allow the couple to rent a place of them alone. And that's when Katerina squeezed the siege. If Svetlana lived in her house, then her whole salary should be deposited in the hands of the house owner, that is, in hers. The answer was a firm no. Was Svetlana willing to pay a fair part for expenses, but deliver each penny? Don't even think. What followed was a show of fury. Katerina, red with anger, was like, "You're nothing. A rag that my son will throw away when tiring. Do you think these changed ones have some value? Without Kirill, you are nobody." Svetlana heard everything in silence, but inside her a decision matured: either she would bend, or find a way to show her mother-in-law that she underestimated her had been a fatal mistake. The tension in the air was sharp. Katerina ignored Svetlana ostentatiously, while she was the sun's ear in the ear of her daughter-in-law's ingratitude. Kirill, desperate, asked his wife to give in for the good of the family, but Svetlana remained unshakable. Until, in a carelessness that would seal her destination, Katerina crossed a dangerous line. While Svetlana bathed, she broke into her daughter-in-law's cell phone. What he found there was a time bomb about to explode. In the messages, a shocking revelation: Svetlana had an influential uncle, director of the clinic where she worked, ready to promote her to the administrative head with a salary of 150,000 riaris. Worse, he had already offered to pay the rent of an apartment so that his niece would escape the unbearable mother-in-law. Svetlana had refused so far, reluctant to depend on favors, but her limit was near. Katerina felt the world collapse. For the first time, she was looking for someone who not only resisted but had options. And options, for a controller like her, were the worst nightmare. The final blow came to dinner, when Svetlana announced, calmly, her promotion and the decision to rent an apartment. Kirill, relieved, embraced the idea of finally having his own life. Katerina, however, saw her empire collapse. Without the financial support of his son, his retirement would badly give to pay the electricity bills. Panic led her to make another mistake. He tried to turn his family against Svetlana, painting her as ungrateful. But the relatives, who knew their dominating character well, just rolled their eyes. "The problem is not Svetlana, Katerina. The problem is you," was the verdict, not said, but clear as water. When Svetlana announced that she would move in a week, Katerina felt the bitter taste of defeat. Worse than losing control over her son was realizing that she now depended on him. The neighborhood was already whispering, and the idea of becoming a source of penalty inside. On the night of change, while boxes were loaded out, each object taken was like a stab in its pride. Until, in a crisis of despair, she broke. He called Kirill, the embargoed voice. "Come back, please don't leave me alone." When his son arrived with Svetlana, Katerina threw herself at her daughter-in-law, crying, "Forgive this old fool. I saw what I did. Don't leave me." There was no triumphalism in Svetlana's eyes by helping her get up. Just a deep tiredness, as if to say, we arrived here on a path that should never have been taken. They did not live again together, but a new deal was sealed. Svetlana began to visit Katerina regularly, helping with purchases. Kirill continued to support his mother financially. But something has been lost forever: the blind confidence of a child, the unquestionable respect of a family. Katerina earned a second chance, but paid a price that no money could cover. Moral of the story? Power built on fear and humiliation is like a castle of letters, just a breath of dignity to knock it down. And sometimes the greatest strength is not to master, but to know when to retreat. Kirill was no longer that man who sought approval with each step. He became a husband who made decisions with his wife, not a son who asked his mother for permission. This change injured Katerina Mikhailovna as a blade, but she no longer dared to challenge openly. Time brought a new chapter, the birth of a grandson, which she imagined being her salvation board to recover control. It was mistaken. Svetlana thanked her for the help with the baby, but she drew insurmountable lines. The choices about the child's creation were exclusive to her parents. The mother-in-law learned, forcibly, to live under new rules. He received affection and attention, but in exchange for a respect that he previously required and now needed to conquer. There were times when the past tried it. The memory of that night, however kneeling, humiliated, with the weight of his own choices crushing her, acted as a more powerful antidote than any sermon. 3 years later, the balance finally established itself. Katerina Mikhailovna had become an ordinary grandmother, loving, present, but without the claim to dictate orders. Svetlana treated her with consideration, although the shadow of distrust never completely dissipated. Kirill, in turn, revisited those days with silent bitterness. I knew that the conflict could have been resolved with less pain if from the outset I had imposed boundaries firmly. Her attempt to please everyone only fed the monster who later devoured him and her own mother, dragging her into a moral abyss from which she only broken. For Svetlana, the lesson was clear and definite: kindness cannot be confused with submission. Sometimes the only way to respect is to demonstrate that you have options and courage to use them. As for Katerina, it took with it until the last day the weight of that knee on the floor, in front of the daughter-in-law that refused to bend. It was the bitter dose that had ever swallowed, but also the most necessary. Ultimate teaching: power that rises over fear and coercion is a trap that soon or later closes over the executioner himself. The story does not forgive tyrants, not even those who disguise themselves as mothers.